Here we are on order operations part 2, specifically focusing on grouping symbols. So if you have not watched part 1 of the notes, you want to go ahead and make sure that you do that before you start this one. But if you have, let's go ahead and get started right now. So before we get started solving order of operations problems using grouping symbols, let's take a little review of our gems. Remember, G is going to stand for grouping symbols, so that's things like parentheses, brackets, and absolute value. Then we're going to have E for exponents and square roots, M multiplication and division. Again, we're going to be working that left to right. Subtraction and addition, again, left to right. But an important thing to remember about grouping symbols is if we have more than one, we're going to be working inside out. So that's important to know. Let's go ahead and look at example A. Whoa, example A starts pretty tough. It says, what is the value of the expression in simplest form? So I've got a giant division-y problem here. I've got numbers on the top, numbers on the bottom, and I don't know where to start. I'm going to treat that bar as a grouping symbol. So I'm going to be doing everything on the top and everything on the bottom before I move forward. So starting with everything on the top, I've got -6 plus 3 parentheses -7. So I know that I have addition and I've got multiplication. So I'm going to be starting with my multiplication. So again, I'm going to underline that just like I've been doing in part 1. I know there's a bottom part of the problem and I know I'm going to be copying it down, but I'm not going to be working on it just yet. I want to focus on just the top. So I'm going to bring over my -6 because that's not going to change. I'm going to bring over my plus sign because that's not going to change. 3 times -7, positive times a negative is a negative, so I end up with -21. Again, keep that inside the parentheses, draw that line, bring over the -4, bring over the +1. All right, that handles the first step on the top, but I'm not quite done. I've still got -6 plus -21. So I'm going to go ahead and know that's my next step that I'm going to be working on. So -6 plus -21, they have double signs. So I can go ahead and eliminate that. Positive and negative are going to give me a negative. So I know I'm going to end up with -6 minus 21. They have the same sign. So I know my answer is going to be negative. I'm going to combine them. 6 plus 21 is 27. So I've got -27 on the top. Bring over my -4. Bring over my +1. I've cleared everything on the top, so now it's time to clear things on the bottom. So I've got -4 plus 1, no double signs to work with there. I know that the -4 has the greater absolute value, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And I know that -4 plus 1, I'm going to be subtracting the difference, so I'm going to end up with -3 over -27. But I'm not done. Because at the end of the day, this bar means to divide. So I'm going to divide -27 by -3. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, so I know I'm going to have a positive answer. And 27 divided by 3 is 9. So I know my answer is +9. So remember, when you have problems that have this really big division problem, you're going to do everything on the top, then everything on the bottom, then divide. It's easy if you break it into little pieces. Don't look at it and panic. You want to just do one part first, then the second part, then you can divide at the very end. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next example. So here we are at example B, and it says, what is the value of the expression? Well, good news. We don't have that giant division problem to deal with. However, it looks like we have multiple grouping symbols. We have parentheses inside brackets. But luckily, I've been learning this rule for a while now. Whenever I have two sets of grouping symbols, I'm going to be working inside out. So I know I'm going to be working on this 4 minus 6 first, since that is the most inside in the grouping symbol. So again, I'm going to copy everything else down. My 9 minus my brace, my -16 divided by, and 4 minus 6 is going to give me -2. I'm going to make sure I keep that inside the parentheses and then bring down my brace. So now I'm not done with my grouping symbols because I still have things inside the grouping symbols. Specifically, I have -16 divided by -2. It's the only thing inside the grouping symbols that's left, so it's what I have to do. I'm going to bring down my 9, bring down my minus, bring down my brace. -16 divided by -2, and negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive, and in this case it's going to be +8. Bring down my brace, and I'm left with just 9 minus 8. Well, luckily, I know how to do second grade subtraction, so 9 minus 8 is 1. And I'm going to go ahead and remember to circle my answer because I want to be able to locate it for my teacher on my paper, whether I'm doing a classwork or a test or a quiz. And let's go on to the next example. So here we are at example C. It says, what is the value of the expression when simplified? And it looks like I have a whole bunch of grouping symbols there. I have absolute values and I have parentheses. So let's take a look at this parentheses first. It doesn't look, since there's anything inside of there, it's just a -2, so nothing to do there. However, I have to do something with both of my absolute values because I have to make sure that I know that absolute value means to take a number and tell me how far it is from 0 on a number line. So I'm going to start with the absolute value of -6, which is 6. Bring down my minus sign, bring down my 5, bring down my times, bring down my -2 inside parentheses, bring down my plus. And the absolute value of 13 is 13, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that down. So that eliminates all of my grouping symbols because I've got both absolute values out of the way, and I can go on to the next part of the problem. So I've got 6 minus, and I've got a multiplication, and I got a plus. So I'm going to be going with multiplication because I don't see any exponents. I still don't see any square roots. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that, bring down my 6, bring down my minus, 5 times -2. Positive times a negative is going to give me a -10. Again, I'm going to keep that inside the parentheses. Bring down my plus and bring down my 13. All right, so now I've got, working left to right, I've got double signs. Minus and a minus are going to give me a plus. So I'm going to end up with 6 plus 10 plus 13, and good news, that is just adding 3 numbers together, and I know how to do that. 6 plus 10 is 16. 16 plus 13 is going to give me 29. I can do that all at once and then circle my answer so that my teacher can easily find it on my paper. Let's go ahead and move on to the final example. So here we are at our final example, simplifying the expression, and it looks like I have multiple sets of grouping symbols here. However, it's not one inside the other, so I'm not going to be working inside out. So it looks like I'm going to be working left to right, just like I would with every other operation in this. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line under my -9 and 6, since that's the most furthest thing on the left. I know I'm going to be starting there. -9 plus 6, I know 9 has the greater absolute value, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And I know 9 minus 3 is going to give me 3, so I end up with -3 inside my parentheses. Bring down my parentheses 4, bring down my minus sign, bring down absolute value, -12 minus 2, close absolute value. So now I've got to go to my next grouping symbol, which in this case is the absolute value. So I'm going to do that inside first, copy everything else down before I begin. And then -12 minus 2, they have the same symbol. So I'm going to be keeping that minus sign. And I'm going to be combining them since they have the same sign. So 12 plus 2 is going to give me 14. Bring down my absolute value bar. So now I still have something to do inside the absolute value bar because I still have to find absolute value. So the absolute value of -14 is 14. So I'm going to bring everything else down exactly as I see it above. Absolute value of 14 is 14. So I'm going to have -14 on the end. Now looking at my next step, I still don't see any exponents and square roots are. I wonder where those guys are going to show up. But since I don't have any, I'm going to go on to multiplication and division. So -3 times 4. A negative times a positive is a negative. 3 times 4 is 12. So I end up with -12 minus 14. And now I have a simple subtraction problem of integers. They both have the same sign, so I know my answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to be adding them up since they have the same sign. 12 plus 14 is 26. So I end up with -26 is my final answer. I'm going to circle it on my paper so that my teacher can easily find it, whether I'm working on classwork or whether I'm working on a test or a quiz. And this brings us to the end of part 2 of order of operations. Still one more part to go. But if you like this part, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. If you love this part, go ahead and throw us a sub, and we will catch you in the next one.